Writers, agents, and publishers, for the first time since the Gutenberg Press, find themselves lost in a maze of mystery as technology alters the shape of the publishing industry. Searching for Answers is a group of writers throwing pop culture, writing, and publishing into a crucible of clarity, passion, and humor. This group is the Right Pack. Welcome back to Right Pack Radio. This is your host, David Allen Lucas, author of, various different things. Right now I'm working on a suspense novel, hopefully. It's called Pattern of Lies. I'm also putting out some serials. The first one is out right now. It's completely off the track, but it's called Skittles, the Feline Colonists from Mars, or Feline Martian Colonists, something like that. And that's being posted monthly. It's told from a cat's point of view. It is meant to be humorous. And with me today is
Kathleen Payambe, author of paranormal romance with the pen name Kiseka and Vita, and lover of Skittles. Taste the rainbow.
Of Mars.
Of Mars, yes.
They're all red.
I'm Melanie Kulani, author of nonfiction, science fiction, and fantasy.
Meredith Tate, author of speculative YA and new adult, and my novel Missing Pieces comes out on March 3rd.
Yay.
Brad R. Cook, author of The Iron Horseman, which is steampunk, and publisher at Blank Slate Press and president of St. Louis Writers Guild.
My name is Jennifer Stolzer. I'm an author-illustrator. My first self-published book, Dog Park, is for sale on Amazon, and now also for sale in our very own STL Books in Kirkwood.
Yay!
So that's pretty exciting. I love steampunk and things. It's excited to talk about punks.
And if you haven't checked out her website, go look at my website underneath stories, and you'll see outside of the Skittles one, you'll see other images or artwork drawn by Jennifer.
I'm sprinkled all about.
Yes.
Fedora Amos. I write Victorian whodunits like Jack the Ripper in St. Louis, and I'm president of Greater St. Louis Sisters in Crime.
Yay!
We write mysteries, by the way. We're not gnomes gone bad.
And now I've got a Monty Python meets noir going through my head. Alrighty!
Fedora, write it. I want to read it really bad.
Good thought.
None's gone
I write
bad.
Nunpunk.
And that's hilarious, considering what today's topic is going to be. Today we are going to punk the punk, or punking the punk. What the heck am I talking about? No, we're not all going to go out and get very bad mohawks, multi-dyed colored.
Ashton Kutcher is not coming in.
Yeah. So, Brad, this is actually really your area, so take us away. What is punk in the terms of writing?
Well, it falls under a lot. I'm not going to read the entire list I have, because most of them are ridiculous. But in terms of punk, we're talking about steampunk and the other genres that fall into that, all of which get leveling classified under essentially what would be historical fantasy, which would be just science fiction fantasy in your local bookstore. But there are four major punks. So you start off with Clockwork. Clockwork being defined as anything that is on the gear and pendulum kind of, drive mechanism. You got to wind it up. Think Leonardo da Vinci. Think, if you saw that Three Musketeers movie that came out a few years ago with the airships and all the craziness.
The one with Jovovich?
Yes, that would be that is Clockwork. Also sometimes defined as clock punk, but I call it Clockwork. Pretty much defined as Clockwork. Steampunk, which is what I write, what I love. Steampunk is defined as being generally during the Victorian era, the Edwardian era, the Regency stuff. But essentially you are dealing with steam-powered technology, and the point of all punks is that they take the possibility of what could have been during that time, but probably didn't because they didn't know they could do it at the time. But we know they could have done it, and then extrapolating it out from there and seeing what you could do with it with technology and some fun things like that. So, take, for example, the classic airship. It probably, as we create them, I know the Sparrowhawk probably actually couldn't fly in real life, but I don't care. It's steampunk, and it's awesome. And then from steampunk, you move forward into dieselpunk. Dieselpunk is generally defined as anything that uses a combustible engine over, say, the steam engine or something like that. So you're dealing with more oil and gas and fun stuff like that. Take some of the extrapolations of World War I and World War II. Some of the great things that you can do with that. Sometimes it's called Nazi punk. But you can have a lot of fun there. And then you come up forward into cyberpunk. Cyberpunk being defined as anything having to do with computers and the crazy technologies we can do with that. If you've read any William Gibson, he really defined what cyberpunk is. It all stems from the godfather of all the punks, which is Jules Verne. We call him the first steampunk author. He didn't realize he was writing steampunk. He was writing contemporary fiction, but 100 years later, we call it steampunk. There are a multitude of other punks. I will jump through some of the fun ones just for now. There's a great list. You can go over to my Tumblr, which is Brad R. Cook, and I reposted Airship Venus's steampunk list. But there's some fun ones: stone punk, bronze punk, sandal punk,
Which is one of my favorites, which is set on.
set in the classical Egyptian Mediterranean kind of thing. You can have your dragon punk, your steam funk, your steam goth, your dust punk.
What is dust punk?
Anything set in the Wild West. Imagine Wild Wild West, the Will Smith, but I would actually classify that as just Western steampunk. So a lot of these get kind of just thrown around like crazy. Fairy punk, which is set in with fairies.
And sounds awesome.
The only one I would throw out that I would actually consider to be an actual genre of punk, maybe even a fifth one if you wanted to call it that, is atomic punk, which really gets defined by the use of nuclear age, technology, but really throwing it back either up into space or something crazy. Imagine your classic Buck Rogers, Flash Gordon, stuff like that would be classic atomic punk.
Atomic punk always makes me think of Tank Girl.
Yes. Well, you could probably go there.
It's a post-apocalyptic sort of atomic punk. It's
Yes.
the fallout of a nuclear war, but everything is based on kind of atomic age technology as they're trying to rebuild it and repurpose it into whatever they can use.
The list that you're reading sounds like the word punk attached to a lot of different things. Can
Yes.
I add punk to other things too?
I'm sure you can. If you
But it's
write enough
probably
of
been
it, it'll
done
become a
again.
thing.
Table punk.
What would
What that be?
Yeah, I'm no longer an illustrator. I'm now a pencil punk.
You're a pencil punk.
Pencil
I like that.
punk.
Art punk.
Brad, could you tell us what differentiates punk from what the rest of this looks like fantasy or science fiction? Can you tell us exactly what the punk part of it
Yes,
means?
that's a very good question. What
can
makes
hear-
it punk? So if you take like your classic fantasy, like a Tolkien-esque, kind of thing, which is high fantasy. It's got dragons, it's got men with swords, and stuff like that. The punk comes in when you take the technology. It's really about the technology that you're using in the story. And the reason for that is, we all have these genres and stuff like that, but when you insert technology they did not possess, but you use it in a way that seems like it could have possibly happened back then. So if you've seen any of the Five Army, the new Tolkien Hobbit and the Battle of the Five Armies, in there they have giant ogres with catapults on their backs, and they hurl rocks at the castle. That is a style of punk that did not exist, and that changes it over from traditional fantasy, which would use, say, a wizard to hurl rocks at that castle. What makes it almost punk is the ability to do that. In steampunk, really, it's what's making it different than, say, your novel, which is set in the Victorian age, in a
your
way,
novel.
but does not. I would not classify as punk. Where mine, which is also set in the Victorian age, even a little bit similar time actually. But the point is that I have these airships flying around and air docks, and I have huge armadas up in the air that have big, broadside battles like they were giant battleships of the sea. That's where the punk comes in.
Now, would Artemis Fowl be considered fairy punk?
This is Brad's thinking thing.
Yeah, that's me thinking back and forth. It probably would a little bit, actually. And it really comes in, like, if you look at, I guess technically one could call, like, I can't think
The
of
Leap, the lower elements police, and
Well, if you think about it, you could almost call, like, the little people, like, Little Punk or something like that. Craziness like that, because they did, there is that element of bringing in some sort of technology and using buttons and safety pins and, discarded stuff like that. And I'm not talking the Artemis Fowl stuff, I'm talking about, So when you do bring in that kind of
borrowers kind of thing,
yeah,
that would be
that
like
kind of stuff,
miniature punk or something.
yeah, mini punk or something
Mini
like.
punk, I love it.
You can have that. So as long as you're kind of taking something and injecting that level of technology that they didn't have,
The point is an emphasis on technology, then.
a little bit. There's got to be an element to the story, and a lot of steampunks take a juxtaposition of story. So a lot of steampunk is about this versus this. If you look at Scott Westerfeld, who wrote Leviathan, which is one of the great steampunk novels out there, he does a real great job of bringing in this kind of biological technology versus a standard iron, and steel technology. And you have that juxtaposition of the two. They're the two opposing sides to each other, and it's an examination of that world. And it's kind of exciting. So punk often is a breakdown not only of technology, it's a breakdown of society, it's a breakdown of, what's going on, and then kind of a look at all of that.
One of you two.
I'm still confused,
Okay.
Brad.
Not a problem.
Well, it's this.
I get that a lot.
I have a term running around in my head, and it is splatterpunk,
Yes.
which is having blood and guts and gruesome stuff on every page. And that, it doesn't have to have any special technology, because a knife will do the job just fine.
that like
So tell me
Tarantino?
about how that fits.
So splatterpunk came around, and it goes by many terms: splatterpunk, murder porn, a whole bunch of stuff like that. And the emphasis there is not necessarily on the technology of how you kill. The technology, the point of that is it's a separation of the other genre by that focuses on the extraordinary and the extreme gore. So in essence, I guess one could say necessarily it's not necessarily technology that makes it punk. It's focusing on a specificity within that world,
Which is really ugly and gritty.
Yeah, there's a
But the technology
grittiness to it.
doesn't
There
have
has
to
to
be
be a
ugly.
gritty. Punk is never clean. So if it's shiny and pretty and new, that's not punk. That's probably something else, or it's like new shiny punk. I don't know.
Shiny punk is
Shiny punk. There you go. But yeah, so splatterpunk really is in that sense of that extreme gore. And one could almost look at Clockwork as a sense of taking that kind of the clock technology and putting it everywhere. But it really is an examination, and then as you were saying, it's a grittiness to it. There's a definite grittiness to it.
So, like, in terms of splatterpunk, might that be something like Quentin Tarantino, like Inglourious Basterds,
Yep.
those kind of movies?
Oh yeah, Quentin Tarantino is very much into the splatterpunk.
What separates something like, if splatterpunk is more a gritty, dirty focus on the gruesome, what makes that a punk that can't be then applied to other things too?
Why can't you have like other types of punk?
That fall under that sort of definition of punk.
I think the beauty part of punking is that you can do whatever you want. If you had turned, if a couple of years ago when steampunk was first popping out, if you had tried to invent all these, nobody would have. They all would have just, there's only steampunk, it's Victorian, it's really, but because of the creativity involved, because of the sense of twist, because everything in steampunk is twisted. Nothing is as it should be. It all gets twisted to some new direction.
I wonder how time travel punk would be.
So you could easily have a time traveling, kind of thing. Even if you look at Doctor Who, has sometimes been thrown out as kind of punkish. But yeah, so I think in that sense, there's such imagination now to twist anything that almost now, according to this list, anything can be turned into a punk. So I would not necessarily throw all of those in, I would not have Stone Age punk, even though the Flintstones is technically stone punk. You can't get around it, but technically the Flintstones is stone punk.
That would make Fred so proud.
Would they? Yeah, but I really would probably just call that fantasy, But to be honest, you can call it stone punk now if you really wanted to.
one of the punks that you read off a little while ago, not the main four, which was Sandalpunk, which is Roman, Greek, so forth, and it uses the technology that Hero of Alexandria created, which, okay, cabbage patch head for a second. Hero of Alexandria was an inventor, mathematician, philosopher, blah, blah, blah.
He was the Leonardo da Vinci before Leonardo da Vinci.
Yeah, seriously. He created steam power. He came up with ideas for steam power and in robots and so forth.
Big
and this is around,
automatons
what, 200, 380, somewhere around there?
Yeah.
Ballpark. Look it up. You guys can find it out there on Google. But how is that, would you call that steampunk as well? But is steampunk set in an earlier day? Or
That's the beauty part of punking everything now. Is that, really with kind of the explosion of the genre, which has exploded. I mean, if you think about it, for everyone who's, when you talk about movies, Wild Wild West probably really kicked off the craze. Mm-hmm. As much as no one wants to admit that the giant spider kicked off the steampunk craze, it probably did.
They were stylish in that movie.
There's other steampunk, like one of my favorite movies, Young Sherlock Holmes, came out before that, and it has elements of steampunk in it. But if you really want to look at it, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen is probably thrown up as one of the most punked movies, steampunk movies you could probably have. There are a ton of steampunk movies, don't get me wrong. There's Steam Boy, there's Last Exile, those are some of the great ones. There's a ton others. But it's a trope that Hollywood has jumped on. If you look at the latest Sherlock Holmes movies with Robert Downey Jr., those have an immense amount of steampunk technology thrown in them. From Hell with Johnny Depp, which is a movie about Jack the Ripper, had a ton of steampunk kind of thrown into it with all the technology that he kept bringing out to do his, forensic work. So really, it's a trope that Hollywood has relied on for a long time to put technology and more interesting stuff into historical periods. And out of that, people ran with it. So I think the point is that it lends itself to imagination so much that we're almost to a point where anything now can be punked. Should it? No, but it does.
I actually had a question and I forgot it. Yeah, I do know. One of the other punks, Cyberpunk, of course, a good example is Ghost in the Shell.
Yes, great example.
Something to watch. If I was suddenly now wanting to write punk, or if I was a reader and I was like, ooh, this all sounds interesting, and I want to find books on punk, where in the bookstore would I go to? Because I know, at least in the Barnes & Noble anyway, they don't have
a steampunk section.
Section.
Like the science fiction fantasy section, I've seen some.
Yes. Go to the science fiction fantasy section, go to the kids section, you might have to look there. Check out Iron Horseman, which is steampunk.
It's really good.
But yeah,
really
so
good.
Check that out. But if you're looking for some great steampunk, start off with some of the best. And that's not necessarily Iron Horseman. But seriously, I mentioned Scott Westerfeld. He wrote Leviathan, which is an amazing, amazing book. He has a sequel to that book. Cherry Priest wrote some amazing steampunk. I think Bone Crushers is the ones coming to mind. There are a ton, though. Gosh, the names are escaping me at the moment. That's really bad because I know them all. But seriously, there are a ton of punk, steampunk especially. If you're looking for steampunk, there is a ton of stuff out there. If you're looking for cyberpunk, there's less. Start with William Gibson and go from there, because he's probably the best cyberpunk writer that has
Neil
ever
Stephenson
existed.
as well.
Yes, and Neil Gaiman's got a couple that you could probably throw under different punks as well.
But not everything Neil Gaiman wrote was punk,
Yeah.
so just to clarify.
What about
Snow
Michael Crichton with Westworld
Yeah.
and Future World? Which, by the way, FYI to those who may not know this, I'm trying to think if it was HBO or it was Showtime, is coming out with a television series, Westworld, based on the original movie. Also, too, oh god, Cyberpunk. Is it Philip K. Dick who wrote? I think it is. Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?
Yeah.
That would also be Cyberpunk. I mean, yeah, Cyberpunk before Cyberpunk was known as that, correct?
Yeah, probably.
Blade Runner?
Blade Runner.
Blade Runner is
the
very
movie that got
cyberpunk.
taken out.
Blade Runner is very cyberpunk.
Well, Blade Runner is based on that.
Yes.
No, I know, but point being,
Something that I've thought about specifically for steampunk is the visual style that I see in cosplayers everywhere,
Yes.
and it's gorgeous, and I see it on jewelry now.
browns over blacks.
So, how related is the visual style to all the punks that we've been talking about?
Hugely. In fact, actually, I would almost say that there's the threat that steampunk is going to be overpowered by the craft section of steampunk. The crafting section, which is the cosplayers and the people who make up the costumes and the jewelry and everything that go along with that. I would say they are outpacing the rest of us in terms of art creation, in terms of books, in terms of all of that, movies. The point being that the visual sense is really taken over, and it's always been a big part of it. I mean, it's always been a huge element of it. If you go online today, you go on Tumblr and you look at steampunk, 90% of what you're going to be looking at is actually clothing. And that's not a problem. I actually love it. I think it's awesome.
Well, you do it.
Yeah.
I mean, you had cute little.
Yeah, I had my
wheels and
pins.
things.
Yeah, I had my pins
They
that
were
you can get with my
delightful.
book.
Just glue some gears on it and call it steampunk.
Try not to do that. No, there's an actual thing. So you are taking the Victorian element in style. So you're looking at corsets, you're looking at the big skirts, you're looking at, the different elements of style that the Victorian era brought forward. And then there's a twist of that. Because they were very formal and very, bound up. Steampunk takes the opposite approach to that, opens it up, makes it more colorful, makes it, kind of crazy. Especially when you get into technology, like there's a huge industry out there of taking Nerf guns, which are very colorful and everything, and then you steampunk it. So you take that cool Nerf gun that's huge, and then you repaint it brass and bronze and steel and, brown and different colors like that. And once it's repainted, you might even take some of the pieces off and put new pieces on it and turn it into your, super gigantic electric cannon. And it's a really big part of the industry. So is having, top hats and other things of that nature, and then having that be steampunked out with the goggles that have the multiple lenses on them, all of that. But that's all. It's a mix of the visual nature, a technological nature, kind of all wrapped up in twisting what was.
That makes splatterpunk make more sense to me, I think. But something you mentioned just now was about Victorian era and how everything was all bound up and the visual style there to do with steampunk. But earlier you had mentioned Western steampunk, like the Wild West.
Yes.
Wild West. Are there steampunk genres for other cultures as well?
Oh, yeah. So, okay. Another St. Louis author in town, Jeanne Lynn, she writes, she's got her new one out, which is Gunmetal Alchemy. And it is steampunk set in the Opium Wars in China. So it is, for lack of a better purpose, Chinese punk. But there is the notion there of you've now expanded it out. So the sequel to Iron Horseman is called Iron Zulu, and it actually mostly takes place in Africa. So one could almost call that African punk. Am I? No. I'm not calling it that. It's steampunk, and it's very much so. But you have kind of a Western notion. We take the 1880s, which is the Victorian era, and we twist it as much as we want, and we've really taken it around the world. So steampunk has now kind of come to mean anything during the Victorian era, because it's that level of technology. So it has more to do with the level of technology than it does actual history, which is why I should say, too, that not all steampunk is set in history. Steam Boy is a wonderful animated movie. It's set in some alternate future. Last Exile is set in some alternate future. These are great movies that incorporate that level of steam technology and then take it to crazy. So they're giant airships flying around in space, or flying around in the skies. And in terms of Last Exile, they're kind of almost exclusively up in the skies. And then there's this giant sky whale that's flying around trying to, smash them all out of the sky and stuff like that. And there's some craziness that goes along, through there. But the point is that really it's just a fantasy tale, a alternative future kind of fantasy. It just happens to be told in that steampunk. The reason we call it steampunk is it's set in that level of technology where it's pretty much mostly steam-powered, iron, brass fixturings, all that kind of fun stuff.
I'm going to go back in time, not literally, but
What are you punking now?
What are you punking?
I think
Now.
this
He's punking
falls underneath Dieselpunk. It's one that you didn't mention, but it's not because it's not.
It was entertaining.
Yeah.
I wanted to know more.
Where it's more about biology and so forth. Brad, you and I probably remember this. I don't know if anyone else around the table will remember this or not. Robotech,
Yeah.
which is still out with Macross and so forth. And throughout the entire series, short version, this is in the beginning of the anime era.
70s and 80s.
Yeah, an alien. Earth is at war with itself all over the place. Massive World War III. Right in the middle of it, alien spaceship crashes into Earth, causes us to suddenly come together. And it's got this power, which actually we learn later in the story, is from a flower, which is kind of hilarious. But this flower, which is as rare as what we nowadays think of as oil. And it allows ships to be able to transform into robots, and fighters fly through space and transform into these guardians and all this other crap. So with that said, am I right? Where would that classify?
If you wanted to call it Gundam Punk, it probably would be. But I would actually just throw it probably up under Cyberpunk, because you're taking that level of computer technology and you're throwing it forward and you're twisting it.
So even though the technology is based on this organic thing, really it's more the technology.
It's the technology. Yeah.
Okay.
You could come up with an alternative for where they were getting steam from, but as long as it was, they were forcing, air through pneumatic tubes and all that kind of stuff, and they were more concerned about the hydraulics going on than they were about, the computer components, that's steampunk.
Today is a very important day in the life of every single writer. Every person in this room will know what I'm talking about when I talk about it. But first, I'm going to give myself a little plug. It is that every week, every Sunday, on my Facebook author page, I give a little bit of history on this date in such and such a year. So look at Fedora Amos author on your Facebook page, and you'll get a whole bunch of these. But for today, what I put on was the name of a very important person to everyone in this room and everyone who wants to be a writer. And that name is, can anybody guess it?
No.
This is the 230th birthday. Can anybody guess it?
Jules?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, he's a little
Oh, no,
younger
that's
than
only
that.
100 years, yeah.
Of Jacob Grimm.
Oh,
Absolutely serious.
Oh my gosh, that's
wow. That is awesome.
Now, Jacob,
Well, happy birthday, Jake.
Hey, Jake. Swell job.
You have done wonderful things for my life, sir.
he was a plotter from the get-go and had lots and lots of very serious jobs. He was a politician, he was a librarian, he was a lawyer. He did lots of things that in his own lifetime got him important money, etc. But for the ages, he is, of course, one of the two brothers who wrote the Brothers Grimm fairy tales.
They collected.
They got them from German folklore and then wrote them down. And some of them were original, though I don't think anyone knows which ones.
Nope.
In 3 volumes in the early 1800s, between 1812 and 1822, they wrote down 170 stories, including some of the most classic of all time, and the plots that we've used ever since. I mean,
Exactly.
where would Disney be if there were no Hansel and Gretel, no Snow White? Where would anybody be without Cinderella? The best plot ever for romance. It's boy gets girl, boy meets girl, boy gets girl, boy loses girl, and Kathleen, could be any variation of that. Thank you. And we still use it today. It is the basis of how
Okay.
many novels would you say out there?
All
I
of
can't
them.
even guess.
I'd say all of them.
All of them. That's a good way to put it. So, congratulations and happy birthday, Jacob Grimm.
I like that.
All right, let's make
Yeah.
a note that it's the 4th of January.
It is the 4th of
Yes.
January.
Yes.
Since these are not aired the day we record
That's true.
them.
So would fairy
Remember
technology...
the 4th
That's
of January.
fairy punk. Well, no, that's not fairy punk, but but I think that what they're doing today, like with the Angelina Jolie movie, what is the name?
Maleficent.
Maleficent. Yes, that I think is probably fairy punk because it's
I don't-
showing
I-
the gritty thing.
I confess
part
I
of it.
haven't seen it, so
I
I,
haven't
don't know
either.
what
I
it's
don't know.
emphasizing.
It might have made
And-
me tear up a little bit, just saying. Just saying.
I hear
Okay.
good
Did you
things
see it?
about it,
Yes,
although
I
I
did.
was
Yes.
very
Is it
skeptical.
is it fairy punk?
I'm trying to decide. I don't...
Is it gritty?
I
I
thought
mean,
it
it
was
seems
more
gritty.
like-
There is a
It's
grittiness
gritty.
to it, and there is
Yeah.
some kind of sense of fairy technology that gets thrown out.
So I have a question. What's
Yes.
the difference between punking something and it just being grimdark?
Grimdark. I like it.
Oh, I love the name Grimm. I'm a mystery
Grimdark.
writer. I
Well
love the name
done.
Grimm.
Yeah,
Well, as we said,
grimdark
okay.
being like what they've done to Batman recently.
Punking is really about the technology, and it's really about twisting twisting the story, and it's also really about that juxtaposition of things. So you could have, but I think you could easily steampunk out any grim fairy tale you wanted to. Is grim itself? I don't know.
So, the Hansel and Gretel witch hunters and
Yes.
Oh, yes.
the
Perfect example of
the Brothers
steampunking
Grimm
something.
movie with Matt Damon and
Yes.
so those would be.
Fairy punk.
That's Hollywood punking
The fairy tales.
the fairy tales.
Is there a Hollywood punk? Because it seems like they're doing a
Yes.
lot of
See,
that.
here's the thing. Hollywood's been doing this forever. This is nothing new for Hollywood. I mean, if you think about it, James Bond is in even some form of like Bond punk. Because not necessarily, were we able to do everything in the 60s that James Bond does, flying around on cool jetpacks and everything like that.
So including a
He's in a
jetpack
car.
is an automatic punking.
A little bit, yeah. But the point really is, if you look at, the perfect example is The Last Three Musketeers. Actually, screw that, because that was a bad movie. The Shakespeare, the Sherlock Holmes movies with Robert Downey Jr. Great movies. Does it really need the high level of technology that he employs, like the charge up stun gun, stun thing that he uses on the big guy, or any of that kind of stuff? Does any of that really need to be there? No, but it gives the audience something that is kind of fun and exciting, and maybe not exactly what Sherlock would have done, but it's twisting that story we know and adding in some elements, and that's punking it. And that's something Hollywood loves to do. But the reality is that when you're really steampunking something, you're not just slapping some gears on a top hat and calling it steampunk. The gears have to have a reason and a function, for being there. And that's true steampunk.
I have a question about Sherlock Holmes because it's come up a few times. Sherlock Holmes was bloody brilliant. He was ahead of his time, and I think the same can be said of Hero of Alexandria, the day we brought up, and of Leonardo da Vinci, whose name I just butchered twice.
Leo loves you anyway. Go ahead.
So, all of these three people, one of whom is fictional, all kind of thought far ahead of their times and had ideas for technology that work.
Yes.
And if you
And were later used.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Steampunk, the idea of what we're doing is doing exactly that in reverse. So we're in the future, and we're looking back and saying, what could they have done? Whereas Leonardo was looking around and going, if I threw a bunch of wood together and I made it in this weird circular shape and I stuck a bunch of guns coming at it and I gave the guys inside the ability to crank it, I could call that a tank. But the reality was no one knew what a tank was. Nobody had the ability to forethought to say, we should make tons of these, armor them, and roll them across a battlefield at each other. But sitting here in the future, where we do have tanks that roll across and fight and stuff like that, I can go, Leonardo could have done that. He could have put wood slats together, could have slammed out the cannon and fired and had a great day of it. Now, with Leo, it's a little different because he's way more brilliant than I am for having the forethought to think ahead. I just get the beauty of hindsight is 2020, and I get to look back.
And let me. I'm not going to interrupt your question. I'm just going to tie another version to it so you can see it. Hero of Alexandria. He actually had the idea for the locomotive. Locomotive was not done in the Roman age because, unfortunately, for humanity, slavery was a lot cheaper, and to have stuff carried by slaves and so forth. But what Brad, you're saying is you can look back into Sandalpunk, using that term, and say, okay, what would Roman Empire have been like if it had been connected by locomotives?
Yeah.
Isn't there a TV show about Leonardo da Vinci that's like a crime show where he
Da Vinci's
actually-
Demons?
Yes,
Yeah.
where he makes the technology that
Yep.
he had just written up in his notebooks and
That is
solves
steampunking
crimes.
Leonardo da Vinci, yeah.
So it does count as punking if it's someone who actually came up with these ideas, but you make them do them.
Well, the reason I would say Da Vinci's Demon is Leonardo Punk. This is
Punk.
fun, just saying punk after everything. So the reason I would say
Make
Leonardo
this into
Punk
a
is a
punk
thing
band.
is because in Da Vinci's Demons works is what Hollywood did was they took Da Vinci's time period, that awesome time of the Renaissance, and kind of went, what could we have done? Let's twist it up and see. And that's punking. I mean, Hollywood's been doing this for years, and the rest of us just really refined it into something that, isn't just slapping gears on top hat.
I have a question again. Let's say I want to write a story that is Weird West, like Wild West,
Yeah.
with steampunk elements and fantasy, because always fantasy if it was me. But I don't know a whole lot about the technology. Can I go ahead and start writing, or do I have to do a lot of research first about what could have been? Or can I let fantasy play
How
this
much
out?
mail do you want?
Yeah, that's a good question. To throw it out, if you're going to throw it into the Wild West, that's different than if you're going to throw it into the alternative dimensional future that is some Wild West of the future. If you're throwing it into the Wild West of the future and you just want them to have kind of reverted back to trains and carriages and stuff like that, do what you want, because you get to play around and you get to go, oh, it's the future, who cares? If you're writing, though, in, say, that classical period of the Wild West, and you want to add in some technology, that's a little bit different, because now you've entered into the world of historical fiction. And you need to get that right. So, can you play around with it? Yes. Did Zeppelins exist? Did war Zeppelins exist? Okay, in my book, Iron Horseman, there are war Zeppelins. Did they exist in the 1881? Nope. Did Zeppelins exist in 1881? Kind of. The Germans were well on their way to developing them and had already developed the basic design in 1881. But the first major, what we would call a Zeppelin, didn't really roll off the assembly line for like another 5, 6, 7 years or something like that. I didn't care. I threw them in there because it's fun, and the word Zeppelin is awesome. But the point is then, it was German, and, trying to go for that. But the point is that you can have a little bit of fun like that. However, the technology that I put in there, so the ability of a steam engine and knowing which kind of boiler you're using or which type of shotgun the character's carrying, that's all true to form. So none of my characters have a pump-action shotgun because they didn't exist yet. They're not invented until the 1890s. So I couldn't have one. But my characters can carry a double-barrel shotgun. That was carried long before then. So and the breech loading double barrel shotgun has been around since the 1860s or something like that, 50s. You get to play with that.
Here's another question. In your steampunk novel, which I haven't read yet, I bought your book, but I haven't read it yet. It's good. Are people amazed by your war Zeppelins? I've never seen anything like this before. Or is the world enough different that war Zeppelins exist in this world?
Now, see, in my world, no. They're not. It's not some great thing to see a giant war Zeppelin fly overhead. That's kind of standard. Because in my world, air travel is kind of how we see it is today. It's very commonplace.
So the point is...
In my book, I imagine that, people have been in the air since at least the early part of the 1800s, and maybe even a little bit before. Because the way I looked at it for Iron Horseman was that the early French... if you want to call them daredevils, for lack of a better term, who started the hot air ballooning craze and everything like that, I imagine them to be more successful than they were and to have been brought in into the fold of society more than they were.
So that's the point. In fantasy novels, it kind of seems like there's more than two types of fantasy novels, but two subdivisions of fantasy novels in set in the real world or set in modern day at least are the ones where magic exists, but most people don't know about it. And then the other one is magic exists and everyone knows about it.
Yeah.
So steampunk is technology is different and everyone knows about it, or technology is different and it still can be hidden and they're both steampunk?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh yeah, most definitely. Because it's not about whether or not people know about it. The point is, it's yet again, it's about twisting up what was and injecting what could have been.
I'd like to invite people to watch my favorite steampunk, which of course is mystery because that's my favorite genre. And it's set in the 1890s, which is my favorite era, the Victorian era,
Yes,
and
yes.
of course perfect for steampunk. It's called The Artful Detective. It's set in Toronto in the 1890s, and it features all kinds of things that were actually possible during that time, but nobody thought of it, and certainly nobody used it consistently until 50 years later, approximately. So that is steampunk because it's so early for its time, and it is delightful, even though the history is correct.
Speaking of punk, and just in general, I know from science, most people that have most of the important patents actually didn't make a whole lot of money on it, because most of the technologies weren't really picked up and widely used until after the patent ran out.
Yep.
So there's all sorts of things that, like, oh yeah, the television was invented way before World War II.
Yeah.
You know, and so...
No, it's very true. And to be honest,
War, too.
Yeah.
one of my favorite things to do, and I've only done it a few times because, to be honest, you should only do it a few times. It's very brain numbing. Is to go through the patent office and see all the crazy patents that have ever been created. Because to be honest, you will find some wonderful steampunk ideas coming out of that. I never would have thought to put a cannon inside of a hat that you actually wear on top of your head. There's a patent
That
for it.
sounds
Though.
hot.
Oh, it sounds real crazy. I mean, and what I
I mean
love,
that in both senses.
there's
like,
a
it's
drawstring
super awesome
next to
hot,
your ear for
and
firing.
also like it's gonna set your hair on fire.
Yeah,
Yes.
or rip your head off in a concussion. Yeah, there's all kinds of funness. But hey, somebody put a patent out there for a cannon inside a top
No,
hat.
Or think about how cannons fly backwards also could make you very bald.
Yeah, there's all kinds of that. But
I
hey,
would
it's
love
there.
it if you like pulled the little string like a lampshade and
Yes.
it fired and it flew straight off the back of your head.
No, I should do the opposite of that. Go through for a law project, see how many patents should be invalidated because science fiction did them first.
Can you do this online, or do you have to actually go to a physical office?
No. So there are great ways you can do this. One of the best ways is just Googling up strange patents. Because other people have gone through and done this for you, and uploaded them to the internet. So do check that out.
Do you have any idea how many were done since approximately 1900? Because
gosh,
the
no.
secretary wanted to close the whole process because they thought nothing else could be
Yes,
invented.
I remember that.
Yeah.
It was time
Oh,
to close
that's
the patent
so
office
weird.
because there was nothing new.
Right. Couldn't be anything new
Yeah,
invented.
there was a whole push to close the patent
What a
office.
bunch of downers.
Because everything had already been invented.
They were
There was nothing else to invent.
Sorry, one of my pet peeves is patent law, in my opinion, needs to be redone majorly. It's
You just caused a whole bunch of patent lawyers to suddenly have heart attacks.
Yes.
yeah. I said redone, not eliminated.
And now they're all alive again.
Yes.
I kind of want to address punk from a different point of view.
You're punking the punk.
I'm punking the punk, and that's the whole point of this thing. Brad, you've talked about going back, taking today and looking back at the fast. And I can imagine some of our listeners sitting out there going, well, this sounds like really fun, but come on, really, could this really happen? Or what would be the point of really thinking about back then? And I'm going to throw a completely curveball at them. American Revolution. True story, Britain was afraid of the colonists. Why?
We were spunky.
Well, not just that.
We didn't
And-
like tea.
And not that we didn't like
No,
tea.
we liked tea too much. We just didn't like taxes.
You
Yeah.
didn't play fair.
No. A certain gentleman who was an inventor, womanizer, publisher, and
One of-
humorist,
One of my favorite people.
one of my favorite people, Ben Franklin.
Yay!
They knew he had worked with electricity and all the little inventions, and they were afraid he actually had, the colonists, had weapons he developed that used electricity as a weapon. Now, he didn't, but if you take that fact, that is a real psychological fact of the day. You take that and you go, here's your steampunk. Here's your punk of that time period. Okay, pretend they had their fear was correct. So now here comes all the redcoats marching across the fields of Monmouth. Open fire with the stun guns.
And there's Ben Franklin, bald-headed with gout and his foot elevated, on top of this huge horse-mounted electric cannon, cackling like a maniac, thinking about in legions, I want this book, someone write this book.
I've got enough project spells I could do that one.
I'm looking at a strange patent now. I googled that. Thank you.
There you go. See, I'm telling you, this is fun.
Look, do the image search too. There's
Oh
one
yeah,
of
no, you
this
should.
guy.
You should definitely image search it.
There's one of a person bent over a board, and a machine is behind him that's like a pinwheel with boots.
I've seen that.
It's a butt-kicking
It's beautiful.
machine.
It is a butt kicking machine.
You know,
The
talking
whole
about
world
that,
has opened up to me.
I know there's a punk out there we haven't talked about, which is now punk. And
Okay, I refuse to call it now punk. Now punk is just contemporary literature. So.
but now I'm going to punk to now punk. If it's possible, what if you wrote a contemporary literature, but instead you took a look at the technology of today and did exactly what you're talking about with steampunk? That would be punking it, right? I mean,
Oh, definitely. There are even movies that do this. If you think about, like, okay, a great movie, this is, okay, no, take that back, a decent, somewhat okay movie that does this would be something like Source Code, that Jake Gyllenhaal movie where they were throwing him back like 8 seconds in time or something like that repeatedly so that he could do this one thing. You know, can we do that? No. But, you know, it worked for a story and it totally made sense and it totally worked out for that. So you can totally do that with today's technology. And to be honest, you can do it with the future. So you can throw it, you know, like, you can throw it into the future. If you look at Star Wars. Is Star Wars punk? No. But it has punk elements because it's not pretty, it's gritty. We don't know what that we're going to be able to do in the future, but this is definitely a twist on the Star Trek-like perfect future, you know, that kind of sense of the perfect future. So Star Wars is, in essence, you know, taking that look at the future, twisting it, injecting technology that we hope they'll have. You know, one could also... It gets funny when you're trying to plunk out the future because you run into the problems of the present. You know, take anything that was made like 20 years, 30, 40 years ago, trying to imagine into the future, you know.
My solution to that is put it so far into the future that technology has time to fall and
Yeah.
collapse and rebuild itself.
But, you know, everyone looks around and goes, how come we don't have flying cars and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff? Well, you know.
We already have a
We
road
can't-
system. Why am I going to waste my time building a flying car?
Well, we keep crashing on the road system. You're not allowed to go in the air until you are okay on the road.
To quote one of my favorite reviewers from Red Letter Media, welcome to Coruscant, home of the mid-air collision.
Oh, love.
ain't that the truth?
So, would you say that Groundhog Day is an example of comic punk?
You punked the script.
Yeah. Now we're just getting kind of ridiculous. But yeah, I suppose
Like
so.
we were
What you could
before.
say if you were twisting it up. And,
Wasn't it kind of inevitable that in a conversation about genres that twist expectations, we would eventually twist our own enough to get to punking punks?
yes.
Punk.
And that's,
Yeah.
That's the beauty part. Is,
Punking
you
the
know,
punk.
you get to have that kind of fun when you're steampunking.
When you're steampunk.
Yes. When you're steampunking. It's very fun.
I thought that was like the new title of a song, When You're Steampunk.
I'm sure Professor Elemental has one somewhere called that.
Brad is laughing.
I am laughing. Yes, there are a ton of, I guess, steampunk artists who would be, or musicians out there.
There's a lot of steampunk bands, including my favorite steampunk band, who actually isn't a steampunk band.
Yeah.
Steam Powered Giraffe. There is one character who was steampunk, like he ran on steam. He's retired. And then there's another character,
Ran on
and he's
steam.
Dieselpunk, who's very futuristic looking, but he's technically Dieselpunk. And then the newest character is, well, there's a Decopunk. You know, he's supposed to be modeled after, but he's still, you know, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's all magic technology. But the newest one is actually Cyberpunk.
I think it would be helpful if you explained these characters.
The characters are robots.
What is Steam Powered Giraffe?
Steampunk Giraffe is a vaudevillian robot band who does both music and stage performances. They're their 7-year anniversary is coming up, so check them out. And if you're in the San Diego area, you can, I think, maybe still get tickets to go to their 7-year anniversary show. They've sold out of the premium passes though, so good luck with that.
Look up the song Brass Goggles. It is beautiful.
Brass Goggles is great.
Yes. I would agree with that.
There may or may not be a Chihuahua.
It's probably the only, I'm not going to say the only, that's not fair, but it's one of the few songs they have are actually fit into the steampunk genre.
Unlike something like Abney Park, which is
Very steampunk.
every song is steampunky.
Meredith, I want you to say something. You haven't reacted to anything we've said.
I'm just listening. I don't know anything about steampunk. I'm learning.
Well, you now know a lot more than you did before.
I
right?
do.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
learned about a bunch of things that I didn't know were things, and now I know.
Anything that really struck you?
Apparently, the rule is you can put punk after every possible
Everything you
genre,
ever want to.
and then that's a thing. I'm gonna do
But
it.
please don't.
Yeah, good punk.
I should throw that warning out there. We didn't really put that caveat on this. Please don't put punk on the end of everything. 'Cause as a steampunk author, I am kind of, I do love this genre. And have loved it for years, actually.
Such a thing as oversaturation.
There is. And to be honest, I love the different punks. I love Clockwork. I love Steampunk. I love Dieselpunk. I love Cyberpunk. I'm a huge fan of all of them.
It sounds like you get upset as someone who knows the genre well when people take the genre's name in vain. When people...
I don't get upset. The point is that it's not about getting upset. It's about, kind of noting that there's so many people have no idea. Like the number one question I get asked when I tell people I write steampunk is, well, what's steampunk?
Mm-hmm.
Because most people have no idea. And so I have no problems educating. I love that. But it's almost fun sometimes to hear what everyone else's take on steampunk really is. That sense of punking everything. So it's kind of fun, actually, sometimes. It's just annoying when they say stuff like now punk, and you're like, really? Contemporary literature is not now punk.
Well, I'm just going to wait for punk myself.
There you go.
Punk.
Punk rock
It's
punk.
redundant punk.
No, just punk.
Redundant punk. There you go.
Another example of punk that people might be able to find to look at. I'm just trying to think of the steampunk or what it falls to. And I can't find it on YouTube anymore. There was a web series called Reese. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Reese
Brad?
Kingdom Falling.
Thank you. Reese Kingdom Falling.
I know that one.
Okay.
Was it a web series? I
It was
think
a web
it's pretty
series.
short. It's like an hour total.
Yeah.
It's like a short film.
No,
There's a ton of anime out there. I can't even think of them all.
Steampunk is getting very popular in like modern culture.
Yes.
And you can find quote unquote steampunk kind of things for sale at Forever 21 right now.
God, yes. Yeah, steampunk is now finally reaching mainstream in the sense that, everyone and their grandmother finally knows what it is, or
Like
at least has
zombies.
heard of it. But yeah, so it's the kind of thing where, everything has been getting punked lately, and, you'll probably see an end to that at some point. I hope you'll see an end to that at some point.
Like, go buy your gear-related jewelry now
Yes.
for your steampunk costume.
Well, I
So you'll
think
have
that
it.
I think the punk cream or the cream of punk will rise to the top.
Which
And
is
I would
funny
agree with
because
that.
punk's supposed to be so gritty. Why do you get good things like the cream, especially coming up?
Well, it's
When the cream goes up, is there punk left?
it's oil-flavored cream.
It's real flavor cream.
Yeah, oil
No, I think-
rises to the top too.
The point is, you have the difference of... You have the difference of, did they take a top hat and slap some gears on it and try and call that steampunk? Or did they really go in and create airships in a world that is comprehensive and makes sense and is beautiful and just made of brass?
So then world building sounds very important in the punk genres.
It can be. In fact, I would say world building is huge in the sense of knowing exactly what you're doing. Because you can take a world and extrapolate it out and go crazy with it and do whatever you want to it. You can keep it historically based. You can, put it into a future, just juxtaposition the heck out of it. So knowing all of that is incredibly important because that's the basis of what you're doing. I'm not telling some great tale of, woe that's going to be going on, for countless generations. I'm not trying to write a literary classic. I'm writing a great adventure story that has a steampunk twist to it. And to that end, the steampunking, hosing it down with steampunk juice, it is kind of what I'm doing to the story. So I'm taking a normal adventure story and I'm hosing it down with steampunk juice. The point is am I doing that to mock the genre, or am I doing that to embrace the genre and make it something beautiful? And I think that's where your cream's going to rise up.
Is adventure necessary to punk novels?
No, it's just it's not that it can be, but the point is that a lot of the Victorian era novels were those classic adventure novels, so it's a trope you can almost fall back on.
So to take this into like a parallel dimension, let's say instead of talking steampunk for a minute, we'll talk about the horror genre. So is what's happened to horror kind of what we're talking about with what's happening to the whole punk genre thing? That there are people who are making good classic, really sincerely frightening horror movies, and then there are people who are making cash grab, jump scare, blood movies that don't have the same sort of spirit of the genre. Oh gosh, Splatterpunk. Gore, nothing like gore porn.
Yes.
Well,
but yeah, and no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, then there are spoofs of that kind of thing, like The Evil Dead, for example, is a spoof of a Splatterpunk.
Well, Evil Dead is great because it started off as a legitimate, like the Evil Dead 1 was a legitimate horror movie. But it was kind of ridiculous to the degree that they took it. So the second one, instead of trying to do more of the same, they realized that they were making something that was kind of funny. And they went the next level with that, with the next level of ridiculous. It's not until the second one that Bruce Campbell gets a chainsaw for a hand. I mean, this is the level we get. And then we have Army of Darkness, which is the third one, and they gave up trying to be serious at all, even trying to be frightening at all, and they just went up and made a straight comedy. I think it's a great trilogy because it kind of shows the evolution and being aware of who they're marketing for.
So it's a punk evolution.
Yeah, like they punked themselves.
I want to see this trilogy now.
Oh, it's pretty gross. It's got some pretty epic gore in it.
So we're into the last 4 minutes of this time period. Do you have any final thoughts or final suggestions or final fears of punk?
I have a final thought, but I want to go last because I want to hear everyone else's thoughts.
Ooh. Who wants to go first?
I have a question about magic punk.
Oh, okay, go for it.
Well, it seems that if you world build well enough, then magic could become a kind of technology that is real to your world and makes sense throughout. Can you have a magic punk, or does that just classify as fantasy?
No, I think you could easily have it. If magic is what powers my engine, and I have, instead of an engineer, a mage or a wizard who's sitting back there, and he casts a spell, and that's how my engine starts up, and then I fly my cool ship. If that's set in fantasy, or if that's set in like the high fantasy or something like that, that would still be punked out. If that's set, in fact, there's a great set of books called The Deathgate Cycle by Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman. I think it's the two of them. Definitely Margaret Weis. But the point is that in that, they do exactly that. They have magic as technology. They have airships that fly around, and they're powered by magic. So, a wizard has to sit there and grab the, control column, and it's like a big, giant magical orb, and that's how he flies the ship. So, it's a total possibility, and that was it's 7 books long, it's awesome.
You just gave me an image. I now am picturing Star Trek, which I know is not punk, and turning it into magic punk with Scotty as a wizard in the engine room.
Sounds
How
awesome.
change the laws of magic happen?
But yeah, you could totally do that and punk that out.
Any final? No?
Well, here, I'll throw out a final thought. So, personally, I love steampunk. So if you want to at all check it out, there's a ton of it out there. I highly recommend you do. Just know what you're getting into. And if you want to see some kick-ass steampunk imagery, pop over to my website, bradarcook.com, and pop on to Alexander's Sketchbook, which is one of the subpages. And there is a ton of art, most of which is done by Jen here.
I'm so useful.
You can see, you are, it's awesome. So there you can see airships, you can see the Iron Horsemen themselves, you can see the Iron Knights that fight them, and even the characters like Captain Baldric and his lightning cannon. So check it out. That's a blast. BradRcook.com.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'm going to give my final thoughts to the esteemed Reginald Pike Devant on YouTube.
Just do some gears on it and call it steampunk. That's the trendy fashion nowadays. A copper-painted chunk of some 1980s junk will fetch a pretty penny on eBay. But it goes even worse.
Oh, and thank you. And on that,
Go
I
ahead
can't
and
close
post
it.
a link to that on our Facebook page.
Absolutely.
Yes, and on that note, thank you everybody for coming again to the Right Pack Radio, and have a great week writing. Tune in next week. The Right Pack would like to thank STL Books for allowing us to record in their bookstore. STL Books and Gifts is St. Louis's newest independent bookstore with an emphasis on fine literature for adults and children, and the most comprehensive selection of St. Louis books available anywhere. Visit them online at stlbooks.com or in person at 100 West Jefferson Avenue, Kirkwood, Missouri 63122. Tune in next week as the Right Pack will conquer yet another pondering issue in the writing industry. Theme songs for Right Pack Radio were written and performed by Meredith Tate. All copyrights remain with her.